All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Susie Taylor. I'm part of the NEBP education team, and it is my pleasure to be part of the speaker series today. Hopefully, some of you have been able to take advantage of visiting with some of our previous speakers. We also have quite a few coming up. And at the end of today, Julia will point out who are our upcoming speakers. We do like to do these very conversationally. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to think about them and put them in the chat. We will have time at the end, of course, for some discussion when you can unmute yourself or put your questions in the chat. And really just be thinking about the purpose of this speaker series is so you get to meet folks from NASA, from universities, from industry, and really make them part of your network. This is a good opportunity to learn from them and to ask questions and really get to know one another. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker today. It's Dr. Araceli Martinez Ortiz. She is from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and I'm very happy to say she is a member of our NEBP Education Advisory Board as well. So thank you very much for being here today. We will turn it over to you. And thanks again to everyone for being here.
All right, thank you so much, Susie, and thank you to the whole team. But most of all, thanks to you students who are taking a little bit of time to come and join these conversations. One of the reasons you'll hear from many of the speakers that they do this work is because they really do care. We care about students and about guiding students and providing information. So I hope that today's short talk will help you in that way as well. It's a little more general than maybe some of the discussions that you have been hearing. Because as you'll see, although I am an engineer and although I have been involved with many NASA projects, I'm going to be focusing on a few steps of guidance that I have found to help me through my journey in engineering. And whether you're a scientist or in pre-engineering or in any other area, hopefully some of the points that I will make will ring true for you. And as was stated, please, drop in any questions you may have along the way into the chat. And think about this also as, my story. So feel free to ask slightly more personal questions if you want, like why I decided something or when I knew something related to, my path from engineering to academia. And that is, so the title of my talk is 10 Steps to Guide You in Engineering and Lifelong Learning. And then I will focus and weave throughout my journey from engineering to academia. As was stated, my name is Araceli Martinez Ortiz. A lot of us Latin Americans like to hang on to our family names, and that's why I have two last names. Martinez is my family name, and Ortiz is my married name. I am an endowed professor, and that means that I get a little bit of extra support in my role at the university so that I can carry out additional research or additional STEM engagement activities like I'm doing today. I'm a professor of engineering education, but I was originally an engineer, so I'll talk about that as well. And finally, I direct a program that I really love that is called the Pre-Freshman Engineering Program. And it's a program that has been here in the San Antonio area for 45 years. Just this last year, it was renamed after the professor who started the program, Dr. Manuel P. Berriozabal. And there you'll see in this cover slide a photo of the two of them, he and his wife, who is also quite an activist and a public servant in the city. And so all of these kind of images and points will hopefully make sense as I go through my presentation. Okay, so let's get going to the next slide. Oh, let's make sure I can. There we go. So I start off with just a couple of ideas about education because it took me a while to really consider education. I was a typical kid who was focused on, oh, I really need to get a job. I really need to help my family. I really need to find a way to be successful and help my brothers and sisters. And I didn't think of education so much as a gift as I thought it was the key to something. Like, it's through education. I really have to study. I really have to do this. But when I look at these and when I share these quotes with you, I want you to think about education as something a little bit deeper. Socrates said education is the kindling of of the filling of a flame. So it's not just the filling of a vessel, right? Sometimes we think, okay, if I read that and if I take that course and if I get this degree, you think of it in a very simple way as if you're filling yourself with information. And we all know that that's not really the most effective way of learning, because uh, the human brain and the human, we learn in different ways. So it's education only begins that flame of wanting to learn even more. So think about that as we're talking. And then the other piece is that intellectual growth should commence at birth and cease only at death. And that was Dr. Albert Einstein. And again, for those of us who think, okay, I have to finish high school and that's 4 years, and then if I go to college, well, that's 4 years, and then I'm done. And so what I have found out is something very similar to what is stated here, is that actually you're not done. We are intellectual beings, and the growth that can happen should be happening at all times, and there shouldn't be a point at which you stop. So let's go to my 10 points, and I'll talk about my story as I do that. So the first thing is find your people and start early. So in my case, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. So although I'm in Texas now, a lot of people assume I'm a Texan, but I'm not. I'm actually a Mexican American woman who was born in Mexico City. And because my family immigrated to go work in the auto industry, to Detroit, Michigan, that's where I ended up. But the point of advice is that you can always find your people. And the earlier you do, the earlier you feel like you're in a comfortable space. And by that, I mean that in Detroit, we didn't grow up in the safest neighborhoods. We didn't have a beautiful green lawn and, lovely birds chirping, and uh, it just wasn't that kind of space. It was a great little house for our growing family, but we really were not. It wasn't my parents' choice to have us out and about, but they did appreciate any school-related activities. So that, for a family who wanted to learn, who was interested in reading, who had come to learn to speak English, it was all about finding a space. And our space that we found was a pre-college program, very similar to the one that I mentioned just moments ago. But this was one in Detroit, and it actually started even earlier. It started in 1976 by this very gentleman right there, Mr. Kenneth Hill. And I started attending Saturday programs with DAPSAP. I started attending summer programs at local universities by the time I was in upper middle and then later high school. And that experience made me feel special. I found my people there. I found other kids who felt like they wanted to climb out of where they were, make something important of themselves. And so I learned, not only was I with great people, but I learned cool things. I had great experiences, and all of that added up to helping me earn academic scholarships. my choice from the scholarships that I had to select from was to go to the University of Michigan. So I'm a Wolverine through and through, and it was a fantastic experience to have gone. From a child who, at 5 years old, I didn't speak the language. There was no language support at the time. But because I found my people, because I trusted in people in education, and because I started early, all of those things were surmountable. I learned to speak English, obviously. I kept my native language. I kept my culture that was cultivated by my family at home, but I also was able to take advantage of many opportunities. And I went to University of Michigan and I graduated as an industrial engineer. The second point that I would share with you is about mentorship and corporate training. For some of you, you may think this is too early for you to be thinking about that, but it really isn't. You can find mentors all along the way. As I mentioned, I graduated from the University of Michigan with my industrial engineering degree, but I spent time during internships. So I was a freshman um, at Michigan, and my advisor, my undergrad advisor at the time, said, "Hey, there's an internship opportunity at General Motors. They're taking people as young as freshmen." And so, a lot of my friends were scared to do that kind of thing, because at the time I was 17. I didn't even have a car. And I didn't even know how to drive. So I'm like, well, how is this even going to work? But when there is a will, there is a way, and we figured out a way. And three of us were accepted into this internship program, and we had a mentor there at the at General Motors. And one of the things that I learned there is, if you're going to be an engineer, you need to learn the job that comes along with it, and that is the production. So even though in my field, the engineers don't necessarily spend a lot of time in making the product, right? We would design the product eventually as an engineer, but it was important advice that I received from a mentor early on, to understand the whole system, understand what happens from beginning to end, and that made me a better design engineer. So I spent time on the production floor with my mentors. And later, as I came back for more internships and more opportunities, I also found out that there were training classes. So I took internal training classes on the various products that we were making, because again, even though I grew up in Detroit, I didn't know a whole lot about cars and trucks before I started in my career, and I really wanted to. And so there were so many opportunities, and so this is something that, as you go into start thinking about your job once you graduate, just remember that basically companies are expecting that you're going to have a lot of problem solving capability, a lot of fundamental things, but that you probably won't know their product exactly or their service exactly. And that's why they offer a lot of corporate training. So that's something that I found out was super beneficial to me, because it was like getting another getting a graduate degree while I was there, learning about deeper and more focused topics, like, for me, quality, ergonomics, and global product requirements. Number 3, another point to share is that it is still valuable, and you have to analyze and decide for yourself to continue with your learning. And in my case, formal graduate degrees at that time were really, really valuable and very important. Now they still are, but because technology moves so fast, there are also other ways. You might have one graduate degree and 3 certifications in something very, very specific. In our case, we didn't have a lot of certifications like we do now. So my thinking was all about the formal graduate degrees. And by the time I graduated from the University of Michigan and I was working at General Motors, well, they wanted me to have a deeper understanding of management skills, if that's, what I wanted. And so they paid for my master's degree in manufacturing management. Now, when a company pays for your degree like that, they don't want you to go away. They're investing in you. They're helping you build your skills and round out your skills. And so I didn't stop working to go to graduate school. Some people might find that that's the best choice for them. But in my case, I wanted to keep working and I did my degree part-time. So it took me 3 years to finish that master's degree, but I kept working the whole time. And in fact, I got married and I graduated with a child as an additional bonus. So that was a great experience for me, a way to earn my degree while I was still learning and while I was getting, an understanding of what was going to be my life. And, not bad to also receive a pay raise and a promotion once I was finished. Another piece that I'll talk about is personal growth. And so I've talked about getting a graduate degree, and I've talked about, maybe focusing on certifications in your case. Um, but also finding things that you love and not abandoning those and continuing to grow in that area is really, really important. Now, I'll tell you in my case, I was and I could say that, maybe it was a mistake. I didn't have a whole lot of people to advise me as far as what courses and how long I took when I was an undergrad. And I was in a big hurry. My family was living in a stressful kind of situation. I had 4 more brothers and sisters to help get through college. And it was really just about how many credits can I take? Can I take 18 credits? Can I take 20 credits? What can I do to finish early? And I did graduate early. I wasn't even 21 when I finished. I finished in 3.5 years. And for engineering, you'll find out that, or you may already know, that's a little extreme. And so I robbed myself of some fun classes that I could have taken, especially at a great university like U of M. So I kind of made up for it later. In my case, I was like, okay, now that's done. Now I've got the job. Now I can take a little bit more time for myself. And so one of the things that I just love and have always loved is languages and travel. So I started working on perfecting my Spanish grammar because I was a speaker, but not necessarily, was my grammar at the same business level, in fact, that my English was. By this time, my English had surpassed my Spanish in terms of writing and, business terminology and so forth. So I took an advanced class in Spanish. I had taken French all through high school, so I really wanted to practice that. So I got a chance to do that when I traveled to French-speaking countries, and the company always paid for language classes if you wanted them. Could be as simple as books and cassette tapes at the time. If you know what a cassette tape is, that's what we had. And then, I even traveled to Germany because there was a lot of business with the auto industry in Germany. And so I had a chance to learn a little bit of German and Portuguese. Those 2 languages I can't say that I ever perfected, but I really enjoyed learning them and practicing a little bit when I was, traveling. But as far as Spanish and French, those are my loves, and I really enjoyed, focusing that time on not only the languages but also on the travel. So, I also at this time had moved to another company. Now I was working for Ford Motor Company, very similar industry, very similar products, but I was focused on international business, which is what I liked. And then because of all of this international work, I was also offered an opportunity to be a director, and they sent me overseas to Mexico, back to Mexico. And it seemed like I should know everything, but no, because I had just been a little kid when I grew up in Mexico City. Now I had a chance to work as an expat, an American living in Mexico City and conducting business there. Um, while I was there, I became acquainted with Microsoft, and Microsoft offered me an opportunity. So you can see how all of this learning just connects, and sometimes it's not really part of the specific plan, but if you are focused on, growing personally as well as in the business, these kinds of things are really, really powerful because they make you uh, have sensitivity and understanding to many cultures, how business is done in different parts of the world, respect for their language and their cultural approaches, while practicing your technical expertise. So that is point number 4, is to not forget personal growth. Personal, or the next step is number 5, career transition. So all of those things were happening in 15 years of my life after I graduated from college. I got that master's degree. I traveled. I had 3 children. My husband and I, figured out ways where our jobs um, where we could support each other as our careers were building and different opportunities came up. And so, things change. After we came back from Mexico, uh, wanted to stop traveling as much, even though I loved it. But now I had 3 little people to think about, and so we said, you know what, let's think about what comes next, and maybe I would take a couple years off. So another point is that consider that there will be career transitions in your life. And if you are prepared, they will come, and you just have to decide. One day, my company had sent me for executive education, and I'd finished a course on international mergers at Columbia, and then I finished another one on leadership and finance at Berkeley. And it just felt so good to be on the campus. And because my kids were also growing, and they were early elementary, I was spending a lot of time with them, watching them learn, and that made me think about, well, how do people learn, and how do they progress, and what are the societal roadblocks that we put in place that prohibit only some to learn some things and others to be left behind. And so I started thinking about all of these social justice issues, and by this time I was in a very comfortable position, and I thought, I'm ready for something that's even bigger, something that asks me to give in my small effort to help, social justice issues. And I've always felt that education is a social justice issue. I didn't, all of these years, 15, 20 years, and I still didn't see a lot of women in engineering roles, especially at my level. And I still didn't see a lot of um, Latinas or African American women. And so I knew that there was something about our education system. And so that's what I wanted to learn. And so I went back. I went back to school, and I got another master's degree, this time in education. And that led to a fellowship to study engineering education at Tufts University, um, at the PhD level. Um, Now, you could think that this is kind of foolish. Like, why would I leave such a cool and director level job and start all over again? But as I said, I was really just motivated by learning and getting myself ready. Again, just like my mentor had said very early on, getting myself ready and understanding the system so that I could give back. And I thought that this was a very important thing that I could do, not only for my children as a role model, but for other children like me. And so I went all the way back. Even after I finished my master's and PhD, I was certified as a teacher, and I spent 3 years in public schools learning how to teach math and science. Now, let's think a little bit more about, now that I'm a PhD, one of the things that we do is as academics, we think a lot and we look a lot at what we call, the shared learning or the literature. And so when I think about topics now, like I was thinking about lifelong learning and why lifelong learning is important in engineering, um, it's that it's such an important part of who we are now, not only as a nation, but as a world, right? We are driven by innovation, by technology, by the application of engineering and mathematics. I mean, look at all the projects that you all are doing in considering, the eclipse and in considering the science and technology of it, and how we measure things, and how we get to outer space, like NASA, to go and explore as scientists. There is just so much that is connected to having a strong STEM workforce. Here we see that the workforce accounts, or a STEM workforce accounts for more than 50% of the nation's sustained economic growth. And this means that if we want to continue growing and living in a peaceful, comfortable society, then we have to not only be the users of these technologies, but also be the innovators of these technologies. And it's important that it also be not just a few, because we can point to the people that who have done great things in the United States and in other countries to create, Facebook and Tesla and these big companies that started out with like genius ideas. But we also don't want to just leave it to a few, right? If we think about who's running those companies, they may not represent our demographics across the U.S., and we may not be changing the living standards of all of us if only a few are participating. So lifelong learning is really important, and in my field of engineering education, I love to point young people to think about careers in this area of innovation, of technology. Just today, I was at a high school earlier today talking to some kids who didn't even know what engineering was. And so it's important to always be open and to become this lifelong learner. And I'll show you how in engineering that is directly being respected um, and being noted. There's an organization called ABET. It used to stand for something very specific. Now it's just known as ABET, and it is an accreditation organization for engineering. And one of the outcomes that they define in order to approve programs of engineering as being ABET approved, and that's like a very high quality level of a program. One of the student outcomes is lifelong learning. So this very topic that I'm talking about, because technology moves so fast, as I was just mentioning, well, it's not about learning or pouring that information into every student and then kicking them out the door, because there isn't enough time, and there isn't enough uh, ability for the brain to just absorb facts. It's more about how do we acquire and apply the new knowledge as we need it. And so what we need are self-directed learners. And they have attributes and they have skills. And here you can see, these are people who are curious and motivated. They're logical, they're reflective, they're persistent. So all of these things, think about do I see myself in that? Because if you start to see yourself in that, then that's a really great thing, because that means that you're not satisfied with where you are now. You want to continue learning, and you're looking for that learning. And as you're doing that, you develop a lot of skills. Some of these you can learn with your teachers in high school, or your professors at the university, or your mentors, as a professional. Um, but we are always figuring out ways uh, to know how to seek information and retrieve information. For some of us who are older, it's been a technology shock to just be so easy with how you do searches and how you find information and how you find the best information. Now that we are having a new technological wave of AI, for instance, well, that means we need to learn even more. There are new tools that are being developed, and we need to find out, how to develop the skills so that we can also be critical in how we look at the results that are provided by artificial intelligence. Because as you may have heard, or some of you may have noticed, not all artificial intelligence is created equal, and it's about what you put in determines what comes out, and how it's going through its search. So we still need this human ability to evaluate and engage in critical thinking in order to resolve these information seeking and develop our information seeking skills. And then number 8. So, I love engineering, and I think even if I had not gone into like anything directly engineering, let's say that I would have decided, oh, I want to start a business. Having an engineering background, and if this is what they're looking for, the ability to identify, formulate, and solve complex problems by applying engineering, science, and math, designing and producing solutions, communicating effectively with a range of audiences, recognizing ethical and professional responsibilities, functioning effectively with a team, analyzing and interpreting data, and as we said before, acquiring and applying new knowledge as needed. These are really superpowers that you can use in any setting, in any kind of business setting. I mean, look at me. I started as an industrial engineer, and I was a little bit worried, like, oh, how am I going to make this transition to be a teacher? But because I was able to communicate well, because I was able to know that I needed to learn more, and then go ahead and learn it, and then connect it to what I already knew, that made me a superpower, right? So I find that no matter where I move, I'm able to use these really incredible skills that I have been cultivating all along the way. And number 9, I'm talking about career, I'm talking about success, I'm talking about learning and having these superpowers, but there's definitely a place, and it's important that we balance all of this, this mission that we're on to learn and thrive and so forth, by choosing to do it in a joyful way. Um, to have a career in engineering it definitely is a challenge, and you want to continuously learn, but you want to find the place that you fit best in engineering, so that it is not always stressful, so that it is not always causing you concern or maybe even unhappiness. Um, and the nice thing about engineering is that I think of it more as a way of thinking and the skills that you have. And then you find the setting, you find the product, you find the service, you find the mission, you know, that makes you happiest. And that is what makes it joyful. So for me, it was super joyful to be in engineering as a young woman, because I could do all of those things that I really wanted to do. I wanted to be a boss. I wanted to travel. I wanted to make decisions. I wanted to learn. I wanted to see all of these different products and people working together. And I've worked a lot of hours. But as my life started shifting and I started having other priorities, well, then I chose to take those same skills but apply them in a slightly different way. And I can tell you that that's been very nice. I'm also continuously learning because I'm a part of in academia. I mean, it's that's what you do. You're just always learning. And although we teach, we're teaching really just to engage and to provide you, uh, to provide an introduction to many things and to present ideas, but we don't know everything. I study before every lecture. I read up on this or that to make sure, okay, is this about as clear as it can be? And can I find something else? And what can I learn from my students? So, I'm in many professional organizations. We go to conferences. I read and write articles. I learn from my colleagues, and yeah, I take online courses. I need to learn new things. So I'm happy to be in a field where that part of learning, the lifelong learning is really celebrated. And so finally, just I would say, believe in yourselves. Know that you can do anything that you put your mind to, uh, but feel free to explore and decide that if you don't want to do something in that particular setting or with that particular company, there are many, many opportunities. And so keep planning and prioritizing and staying open to be a lifelong learner. So I hope that those 10 nuggets can help you and also reveal to you a little bit about my own story, because sometimes hearing someone else's story and how they did it and what decisions they made are also helpful in how you see yourself. So that's it for my planned remarks, and I think we have a few minutes for questions. So I think I'm going to stop the sharing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that cool talk. I took a lot of notes myself. That was really awesome. I really appreciated your emphasis on lifelong learning. I think a lot of us can relate to that no matter the age. And one thing that I really noticed when you talked about the qualities of a self-directed learning and then the engineering superpowers, the qualities that you were listing match up really well with some of the skills that our students tell us they're learning alongside the ballooning. So the
Yeah,
teamwork and the critical thinking, I thought that was really cool.
fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate that, Susie.
Yeah. So let's see if anybody would like to unmute and ask a question or raise your hand, and we can call on you or just put something in the chat. And by the way, I don't know if you saw our chat, but it looks like we have somebody from the University of Michigan team in the audience.
Woohoo! Go blue! Go blue!
All right, I'm going to ask a quick question while people are formulating their questions for you. Um, I loved your emphasis on world travel. Do you have a special place that you would recommend, and maybe somewhere that you haven't gone yet that you'd still like to go?
Yes. So, last year I had a chance to go to um, the International Astronautical Conference, which is a space-related conference that I went to with NASA, and that was wonderful. It was held in Paris, and I told you I love languages, and my French teacher in high school was a native of Paris, and because of that, and because I was very young, I just imitated her sound. Right. And so I learned, and because I spoke Spanish and it's a Latin-based language, it was very easy for me to learn French, and I really, really loved it. And I had been to Paris before, but this time I was there for 2 weeks, 1 week for the conference, and then there was an additional week, and it was really, really special because it gave me a chance to loosen up and use my language skills and really see and appreciate not just the touristy part of Paris and its surrounding areas, but also the business part of that place. And so it was just really, really wonderful. So I would recommend to anyone to travel to Paris because it's very special. As far as someplace that I would like to go, I have not traveled enough in the continent of Africa. I've only gone once to Ethiopia, and I was there for a week working, giving lectures on leadership development for women at 4 different universities, and it was a very special experience. And it was hard because we were driving in a truck, a little van, I guess, across Ethiopia, and just being very, very connected to the culture and being very respectful of the place. And it was just beautiful because people were so lovely and welcoming. And so I would love to go to other countries in the continent of Africa.
Awesome. Julia, okay, maybe you could moderate our chat for us. It looks like we might have a few questions coming in.
Yeah, there's a question from Abigail. If you could go back, would you spend more time getting your undergraduate degree? Do you have any regrets about getting through your initial formal education so quickly?
Yes, if I could go back and if I could afford it. So these are the things that, I could say it easily now because even though it's extremely expensive to go to college, once you're in a professional setting, you could even get by with loans and know that you're going to be okay. But in our case, I don't know that my 17-year-old self would have changed what I did at that time because it was super important for me to be done and start earning money. Um, and so I know that what I would advise is if it's possible for you to spend more, for a student to spend more time, they definitely should. So for instance, for my own son who studied engineering and finished his degree, he took 5 years. And that was because I kept saying, just relax. That's great. Take the study abroad. That's going to be wonderful. You love geography? Take a minor in geography because that makes you happy and that's going to add skills. And there's no reason for you to hurry and rush into the workforce. And so that gave him as a student a richer experience. I would have loved to have that experience, but I think that's why I did pursue more education along the way and more travel and more of that. So I got what I needed. I just wasn't able to do it financially without taking $100,000, in debt in my later years.
Another question from Marissa. Do you think if your family lived somewhere else or you were in a different career or field, would you have pursued engineering? Or do you think you would have considered other STEM professions?
That's a really good question because I think we don't know what influences us completely. Um, I know that my dad and his brother were very, very good mechanics, and they had a lot of skill and really super smart with math. I mean, they did mental math like that. And so they were always challenging us to solve math problems, to learn some basic skills, out there with anything, any projects that they were doing. So I think because of my family, who was very much about solving our own problems and, oh, this can be fixed, this can be understood, this can be solved, and then their emphasis on education, I think, it's possible that I could have gone into a slightly different field, but I really, maybe architecture, maybe a science, but I think it would have been around the same kind of sphere of topics because, I could have changed at any point, but I kept going because I liked it.
Angela asked, what was your favorite part of your rotation with NASA?
So I think my favorite part was that um, they had a project with tribal colleges, and they wanted to understand how they had been doing their programming in the past and their funding in the past so that they could modify for a future opportunity. And because I'm Indigenous myself, I love that they were considering, cultural aspects of a people, and trying to figure out how to make sure that they were being sensitive and appropriate and effective in the ways that they were offering to partner up with different tribal colleges and universities. So I think that was one of my favorite projects with them because number one, I learned and got to go to different places and meet with different colleges and universities. I started doing reading on that, and I actually wrote a paper on, just an overview of what they were doing, along with some recommendations and frameworks on how we could do things in a more effective way. Because, the tribal colleges and the tribal populations are sometimes represent such a small percentage of the overall population in the United States that it's easy to say, oh, well, that's less than 5%, so let's not worry about that. But that is a whole people. And that is a whole people that have suffered trauma historically. And so it's a responsible and really honorable way of looking at how we work to, bring in equity and inclusivity into all of our work. So that was the one project for me.
There's another question from Caitlin. You talked a little bit about making education and knowledge, specifically for engineering, more accessible at a younger age to have the exposure to engineering and spark that interest early. Do you have any insights on how to improve this around the country and maybe how to prevent discouragement early on in college because of the weed out classes that can make it difficult for otherwise interested students?
Right. So I think there are maybe two or three different points in this, and this is a complex topic. We can focus on the students and say, oh, we need to fix the students and get them motivated and prepared. But we also need to focus on the system. And we need to understand, well, what is the system rewarding and how are we making sure that students are getting a fair and equitable exposure to these things so that they can have the opportunities. So let me try to answer the question that just kind of outlines it. So when we focus on the students, we have opportunity to motivate early, and those experiences I've done research myself that says like even a week-long workshop in robotics can make a difference in how students think about themselves and how they start to change their minds about, oh, I'm not a math person, or I am a math person. I'm a problem solver. I think I can be an engineer. So I think that there is enough research now that shows us that even short experiences that are significant. So I'm not talking about a 1 hour visit, but I'm talking about at least, 20 to 40 hours of exposure of something in a short period of time in an intensive way can really make a difference. And so I do support Saturday programming that goes on, for multiple Saturdays, or summer programming that goes on for multiple weeks, or partnerships with schools where we take a topic and maybe visit it throughout the school year, adding up to engineering in the elementary school. Those experiences can be very motivating and very impactful to young people. It also changes the attitudes of teachers, because sometimes the teacher is the one who has had a bad experience with math or science, or doesn't have a really good relationship with understanding what engineering is. So we also need to work with the teachers. And this is where I start to get into, it's not all about the students and blaming the students and they're just not prepared. It's about the system. So if engineering wasn't in the curriculum, then why would you teach it? And because the school system is asking you to make sure that the kids do really well in reading and math, because those are the two things that are measured, and that's how the school gets their funding. So it's understanding what are the reasons why the system is focusing on some things. And how do we go about it? You know, like I said, that's why I support programming that is in addition to. I support uh, new learning standards. Now we have something called Next Generation Science Standards and Common Core Standards that start to weave in engineering ideas at a very young age. That doesn't happen in every state, but it's happening more and more, and that's very encouraging. Here in Texas, although the standards were pretty good, they were not connected to the Next Generation Science Standards. And that was a problem because I was in Massachusetts in 2003 when they were putting engineering into the elementary school. And in fact, I helped to develop a curriculum called Engineering is Elementary. So it's all of these things working together. So it's the parents supporting the students, knowing that, yes, even their kid who maybe, you know, doesn't have the kind of support that they wish they could give them at home, they can still do really well in math and science if they push them in that direction to at least consider it. Having schools include more opportunities like this, truly paying teachers more so that they can have the skills and the preparation in more of these areas, taking in like NASA curriculum like we have into the school systems would be fantastic. And then working with states so that they change the way that they, that they rate schools so that they can look at maybe longer term effects and give kids a chance to show their development over a longer period of time, I think would be more effective.
I don't think I have anything more in the chat, but I did want to ask you, and I'm assuming that you work with a lot of graduate students at UTSA, and I know you had a slide about like if graduate school is the right thing for you and kind of your experience with it. And I know a lot of our students are kind of thinking about that path. Do you have any kind of insight for them to like the application process or looking for programs or kind of narrowing down what they might be interested in?
Well, I think graduate school is very much focused on research. And so one of the key things to consider, well, I should say graduate school in our STEM fields is often very focused on research because we are researchers, the faculty are researchers. And what our mission, you know, we have three things that we're responsible for. We teach, we provide service, professional and to our university and to our community. But the third thing is research. And research often is the one that takes the most amount of time because you have to run really large programs. You have to find the funding to be able to hire the graduate students and pay graduate students, not the scholarship necessarily, but stipends so that they can live and work as graduate students without earning another living. And so that means that graduate students rely on the research funding that is brought in by faculty. And that's why there is a strong emphasis on research, especially in the STEM areas. So I think as a graduate student, you want to think about, even if you don't intend to go into academia, what kind of research do you want to associate yourself with that will give you the latest and cutting edge knowledge that you can then take into your next step, into your next career. And so many graduate students will find a professor who they value, how they work, how they think, how their lab operates, and they'll go across the country. And many students come from international students come to work with a particular lab or a particular professor because of the work that they do. And that association is important for them, right? Because they're going to get to carry out the research. They're going to possibly get skills in learning that topic even more deeply, but they're going to find a way to make it their own. So they're going to find their own path within that. So if I had known that I was going to end up in academia, I would have probably gone to graduate school, not part-time, but straight through, and tried to work through that way. But that's really not where I was at the moment. As you know, as I've mentioned, for me it was more about, I want to get a job, I want to work, I want to contribute, I want to earn my paycheck, I don't want to have any debts. And so that's what my thinking was. So graduate school was not really preparing me for grander things. It was more about preparing me for some skills so that I could make decisions, more thoughtfully. So I hope I answered your question there, but for some people, graduate school is almost a requirement. You want to make sure that you do that. You want to make sure you line up with the right professors. For other things, I'm beginning to think, even though I'm a professor, that it may not be necessary to have the traditional, okay, now it's time to get my MBA, or now it's time to get just my graduate degree in education, anything, it doesn't matter. Because there are so many new ways of learning, focused ways of learning, and maybe what you need is a graduate certificate in data analytics, and that's going to make you really fantastic. So I just don't want to bias and just keep saying that we all need, these continued and predefined steps of 20, 40, 50 years ago. Things are changing, and I think that we should just be open to learning in new ways.
Well, we're almost at the top of the hour here. I do like to ask our speakers, is it okay if our students reach out to you in the future if they come up with any other questions or have ideas for you?
Yes,
I know
yes,
you had I know you had your email on your last slide. If you have access to the chat and are willing to share your email with the team, that would be awesome. I also wanted to say thanks for talking about your NASA work with tribal colleges. I know we have several members of the Salish Kootenai College team online with us today, and they've just done some fantastic work. And I think they get an award for most participation in the speaker series, which is pretty awesome. So shout out to SKC. And thank you very much to Dr. Martinez Ortiz. It was great to have you with us today. It was really cool to hear your story. I did want to say the engineering is elementary curriculum is very highly regarded. I did not realize you were part of that development team. So awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being with you all. I just put in my my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. And if you're interested in a master's degree in engineering education, that's a new program that I'm running here at UTSA, and we'd love to have you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your talk today, and thanks for everybody for being here today. Have a good rest of the Valentine's Day.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day. Thank you all. Bye. Yes, go blue. Thank you.